Welcome to Infinite Parkour. How it works is exactly what you see in front of you, where every block that I jump to generates a new one directly in front of me, and you go on forever, hence the name. Now, the amount of jumps I'm getting is tracked on the right, and whenever I fall off, like right now, the highest number gets scored on the right, which is 158 right now. That's how this whole thing works in its current state. But there is a lot more I want to do with this, and I've been talking about it in previous episodes, but you don't really need to see those because I'm just going to be focusing on decorations today. So let's take a little look at the work board. This is where we left it last time. Everything over here are ideas for the different sections of the game, like the gameplay, the visuals, the meta progression, the bug fixes and stuff. Of course, our main focus is going to be this group today. Over here is all of those put into groups based on what function they have. This section right here is the decoration section that we'll be looking at. And everything here with the end rods in front of them are marked as complete. And everything here should be from, wait, what's going on over here? I don't remember this section. Development? Oh, wait. Change sign color when the idea is complete. Oh, yeah, no, that'd make it a lot easier. Like, imagine if I could just run a command that was positioned exactly where I was looking, and it was based on a function that would immediately replace the sign with a different color so I know that it's complete. Oh, there we go. Yeah, so that's another idea I should talk about before I change anything with the new suggestions, is that someone told me that I should change the sign color instead of these stupid end rods, and I 100% agree that this works a lot better. So yeah, I just wrote a little function on my own time to do so. Now I gotta go through and mark all of these. There we go, that's a lot better. Everything is a lot more contrast now, and it's easier to tell on a quick glance what is complete. So now that I have everything marked down as what we've done so far, what I'm going to do is remove them from this board and then filter in all the new ideas from the last episode where you guys left a bunch of comments, so I can add those here. All right, wow, that was a lot of ideas there. You even got me to break the floor because there's so many, especially in the decoration section, which is good because that is where we're focusing on today. But all the new ideas are not colored yet because I gotta throw colors on them and then put them in these sections over here. So I'm gonna do that real quick. And there we go. Everything is now been categorized and thrown over into their colored sections over there. I'll show you in a second. Here's just an overlook of everything that was changed, at least most of it. I would like to mention that just because I wrote it up here does not 100% guarantee that it will be added into the game. I'm sorry. I'm starting to, realize the list is starting to get really long, and I'm not sure if I'll be able to get to every single thing. I would also like to mention that I might have missed your idea if you left a comment. There was a lot of comments last time, and I try my best to try to sift through, read every single one, mark down the ones that have new changes. Anything that's a repeat change, I'm sorry I didn't throw you on here just because I already have it here. But if like multiple people suggest the same thing on the same video, then I'll probably throw you guys both on here. But otherwise, people would just constantly spam the same thing, and I would end up with like 10 names to the same idea. So that's how that worked with how I found comments. I'm sorry if I missed you. If you're confused about the colors and such, these are just groupings of how things are set up based on how the game processes it. Basically, it'll do everything in here when you set up the game. It's going to do everything here all the time. It's going to do everything here when you just start the game and hop on that platform. This is running constantly while the game is going. This is how the game gets started and what we're doing for the gameplay loop. This is everything to do with how blocks are placed, and some of the stuff down here as well. I kind of have two groupings for that. And then this purple section is everything with decorations, which is everything we'll be looking at today. Another little note I want to make is this section down here, which was a fix for armor stands. I kind of moved it back because everything here is done. There's nothing new that's going to be coming of here. It has served its purpose, but I'll keep it around. It'll just be behind everything. Now, it's funny that I mentioned that I'm going to do this section next, but I'm actually going to be doing a setup change first. Right here, we need to place this game inside a different dimension. Basically, data packs let you create custom dimensions. It's technically an experimental feature or whatever, but it's perfectly fine if you're not doing anything too crazy. And I need to place this game inside of a custom dimension so that we don't affect the normal survival world. I had actually no idea I could do this. I later discovered how it works in a different project that's on my channel that I did just previously. So I learned a lot from that, actually, including some other things that I'm going to bring up, but that's kind of getting ahead of myself. I just need to put this in a new dimension, and the reason why is you might notice that if you watch the previous videos, this area looks a little different. A lot of blocks missing, including all of the command blocks over here that used to run the previous version of the game. And that's because I had an incident earlier. Here's a clip of it. This just completely ruined my day. And not only that, completely wasted my time by like a lot. And what basically happened is there's a part of the code up there that is constantly clearing the blocks around me into void so that when I go past decorations, they would get cleared out, which is important to note for how the decorations are going to work. And I accidentally brought it over here and it just destroyed everything. I spent like a whole hour rebuilding this sign, which was such a fun way to use time. So yeah, everything needs to be placed in a new dimension. It will just be 100% safer for the player, for me even. We can still use this world to organize information, stuff like that, but I'll be moving into a new dimension that is still void for everything there. And that's going to open up a lot of opportunities for some really interesting fixes I can do, as well as mechanics for how the lobby is going to work over here. I'll get into it. Let's make the new dimension. And I think just like that, so if I execute within the new dimension, I just called it infinite parkour, which is really funny because it's just the same name colon the name, but whatever. I have to just execute in here and then I can run a TP of me to any place. Let's just go to 0, 0. And it teleported me in, and it's exactly what you expected, a complete void world. Now I could add custom generation now and technically not make this a void world, but the main original aesthetic was the void world, so I figured I should keep that going, you know. I've generated 500 blocks of air. I don't know if that really has an effect on like height limit. There is one now, or if I can remove that, not entirely sure. But now what I'm gonna do is change a lot of how this works. So let's just go back real quick. So we used to have the physical lobby in the world wherever you place down the shrine, as I would call it. I don't know, it's just a structure that I made out of 8 gold blocks and throwing diamond into a fire that would activate the parkour. And it used to place a lobby directly above the player wherever this was built. And I used to force the player to only have one of these per world that everyone would have to use. But obviously in multiplayer situations, that's limiting. So now this could generate, and you can have as many as you want within a world. Clicking on them will teleport you directly into the lobby. And now I have added a new button here just for testing to click that will bring you back. Now there are some things that I'm going to change later that I'm not going to do in this episode. Like for instance, that teleported me into the fire. I might want to be up on this block instead. I want to be able to actively teleport the player to whichever one they entered in. And obviously the location of this is going to change whenever you make the lobby like I've been planning. But right now it is just teleporting me from one to the other. Not hard coded, but based on the fact that it's thinking that there's only going to be one of these. And so it's just teleporting me to only one of these. It's not dependent on if there's multiple. I'll make multiple work though later. But with this little addition, what this means is I can activate this reset command one last time, and I can get rid of this because it won't matter where the shrine is placed down anymore if it's only going to bring me to the new dimension. So let's get rid of that, and I can just throw this up here. Like that. A little small change I've done to these in and out teleporters is they mention click to play and click to leave because I can right click or left click. It's kind of hard to tell, but I'm doing both right now. That was a section on the board that I just implemented. All right, so now it's finally time to talk about the decorations. Let me just make sure everything works in this new dimension. I believe the transition was pretty much seamless and very easy. Now everything is just working in here. I am back down at like Y level, negative, whatever, but everything works. I might move it back up, but I shouldn't have to with how I'm going to do the decorations. So one very classic decoration from the original version, I might be showing it on screen here, is these big yellow pillars made of gold blocks that would spawn while you play. Now, making gold blocks that are that big just was not efficient enough. I would have to clear this huge area that was around the player, and it wasn't so great. Now, over here, there was a suggestion made just recently to use block displays to create all of the decorations, and how that'd be a quick way to clean everything up. So if I made all the decorations entities instead of blocks, I wouldn't have to fill the area around the player. I would just have to kill all the entities with one tag, meaning I can get rid of all the decorations with one command, which would make things so much easier. If you don't know what a block display is, let me summon one in right now. It is an entity like I mentioned, but all it does is mimic blocks. So I've just summoned one in. You can't see it, but that's because it has no data. So I'm gonna modify it. It seems to work based on the tag block state. There it is. So here's a block display displaying stone. One big thing you might notice immediately is that there is no hitbox, and also it doesn't have to be aligned to the game's grid, which allows for some really great ways to customize decoration. But there's also another thing that's really going to help us called transformation, especially with the scale feature right here. This lets you set how many blocks this thing can take up, meaning yes, I can make it bigger than a block. Here, this is a stone block 20 times the size of a regular block, which is crazy and huge. And we could really play with the perspective with these new decorations to be way more insane. Now, I will admit, this is a little bit different compared to a block of stone made out of stone because of the texture. This honestly doesn't look too great with this texture because it's super big pixels, where this is way more detailed. But at a certain distance, this doesn't really matter as much. I'm right next to it, but with how far away we're going to be viewing it, scaled up textures like these won't be too noticeable. And yeah, we could basically make huge pillars like I was talking about before in a way easier way just by scaling it differently. Here, I'll show you. It doesn't have to be a perfect cube either. For instance, here's a 10 by 10 by 200 scaled block display, just to show that it works. I mean, it does look a little weird, but let's move that down. All right, so I might have ran into our first problem. I teleported it down and it immediately disappeared. There does seem to be a render limit to these. It's not based on direction, but I think distance. So this is at -48 and I'm at 100. So it looks like past 150 blocks or 160, they stop rendering because they're entities. Maybe I can modify that. Oh yeah, there's a view range component. We need to up that to make sure we can see it from farther away. Here, I just made it a very big number. So now I actually made it perfectly in line with the platform. That's really funny. Here is our entity. Now when we're inside, it is invisible, so you have to be careful of that. But yeah, this gives you that effect of like infinitely stretching downwards, and it's not too bad. Now this texture is a little weird, but there's other options for us too. We can turn this into like segments of blocks using multiple, or let me go back to modifying the texture. We could just look for better looking textures. One that I think would work really great is like black concrete, where it's solid black, so it's just a pillar, although that's questionable if that's really that interesting. What about other type of smooth texture? Like this is a block that is still textured just on the lesser end, and it doesn't look half bad. I mean, these are all not the best examples because they're not with the theme. Yellow terracotta, see the differences in pixels isn't as noticeable, so it doesn't look too stretched. I don't know, maybe the stretchness is kind of just a part of the effect. Either way, this top part looks a lot better, but we could use this to make those pillars way faster now. And of course, what we were doing before with the like slowly sloping upwards or downwards, we now have a lot more functionality with this. So I think I'm gonna get gold pillars in. Let me just see what that looks like. I might not be able to stretch them as much. Let's try to get some gold pillars generating around the player as they jump, because what we have up here, which I didn't really mention before, is that after every jump we then let decoration run, and decoration is what places things around the player. We randomize different effects, being particles, sound effects, mobs, structures, and we could throw these pillars right in. So I think I just implemented the very basis of this. Right now it's going to randomize on every land between 0 and 1, and on 0 it's going to place our new structures. So this is a 50-50 chance. This isn't realistic to how I want it to be, it's just for testing. So let's see if we get one. And oh, there he is. So I decided to play with kind of the absurdity of how this is working, and I went for just a huge cube. because I think it's kind of funny to just see this big thing, and it just happened right there. You might be able to notice it generated 2, and I believe they're on top of each other, and probably a bunch more. Yeah, wow. But these are kind of crazy, right? They give some weird sense of scale that makes us feel like such a weird area. But since they're so big, I do kind of have to incorporate some way of preventing overlap from happening without it looking weird. But I have some other ideas of things I want to try to do, especially with rotations. I think I can make it look really interesting to have different rotations than just solid up and straight. I do gotta fix that overlapping as well, but I'm gonna do the rotations first because I think it's more fun. So I've been playing around with the different ways to render this guy in. I think I've came up with something that I think is interesting, or at least can be interesting. I have it as a tall pillar again. I know we were playing around with like the huge block size. The texture does look a little bit weird, but I kind of like the feeling of having a big structure that goes all the way down, and how I made it like tower over you is kind of interesting. One thing I did do is I did prevent the overlap. As you could tell now while jumping around, there's only going to be one by this guy because they have a distance of 50 now, but with the way that it also automatically deletes, you saw it generate the second one in there for a second, it kind of almost never has more than one on one side, although we were able to get one for a split second there. Speaking of which, with the deleting, I had to add that recently too. Basically, one block behind the player, we check to see if there is an entity, and then we get rid of it. And as soon as that guy was gone, this guy could come in because there is no longer a block entity near this one. So that's what I currently have. But there's one key thing with block displays that I didn't really get to mention. I don't have one over here anymore. I accidentally deleted all my entities. My bad. But let me grab one. So there's this interesting thing about block displays called interpolation. Now what this is it allows you to tell a block display to change in any way, size, shape, scale, transformations, all of those over time, which basically allows you to introduce slight animations to these. There's two main things. There's interpolation duration, which we could use to set how long it is going to interpolate for. It's how many ticks, the max being 59. We'll try that. And then there's also start interpolation, which is how many ticks until it starts moving. So I could set that now, but it's not going to do anything because we haven't described any motion for it to interpolate. We could do that with its transformations. Basically, interpolation works by setting it to a new transformation at the same time as an interpolation. This beginning part tells it the parameters of how to do this second part's motion. So let's just scale it and make it huge, and in theory it should do this over the time I've set. So here we have a block that is double the size, and I'm going to set it to 10 times that, to 20 the size. And as you can see here, it's going to wait 10 ticks, and then over 59 ticks, which is about 3 seconds, it will do the motion. So here's the command. As I hit enter, it waits those 10 and does it within about 3 seconds. So we can use this to make smooth motion with these displays and cause some types of animations. And that got me thinking of what type of interpolations we could do for our pillars here. I have some ideas. Let me try them. So let's take a look at this new animation. I'm sure it's going to show up really quick here. There it is. So it starts out small and at the ground, and it just slowly grows up to your height. And I think it's a really interesting way to do it. It gives us really cool effect of like sprouting up from the ground. There's more I could do with this as well. I kind of wanted to do something from like the sides coming outwards, but it looked weird because of how this scales from one corner, not the center. So it was growing out from the edges, which is weird. So what I want to do kind of quickly is kind of throw this on the other side and mirror it so that you can have both happening. Another thing I was trying to think of is like, should I set the height to around the player level instead of above the player? I mean, it adds the effect that it's above you, but it also kind of looks weird. Maybe it could stop like there instead. Here we go. So now I'm gonna get these guys in, and now there's a guy on that side. I made them face both in the same direction towards the player, but they are at slightly different heights. I didn't even realize that. I did not even make that intentional, but that's probably because of the different spacings of the block. But with these both on either side, which has this really cool like canyon effect of me going between the two, there's a very high likelihood that we can get really close to these. Like if this block generated over there, which it totally could have, we might start intersecting this block, and there's chances we can get blind jumps, which would really suck. So I gotta implement something to make those like translucent when I'm nearby them. I just don't know how to do that because its bounding box is really far down. So it's like impossible to detect when the player's nearby if it's all the way down there, you know? But there's still some things I could do with like spatial detections that will work. There we go. See, that's an issue because you have to jump here to even see through them. So let's do that. All right, so I fixed the issue with these guys now where if you have blocks that generate pretty close or inside, as you approach, it will go invisible so that you can see where your jump is and where to go. It's about a 5 block radius around, which I believe is like the biggest size jump you'll find anyway, so it is a-okay. I wanted to do something where I just went like translucent or whatever. Turns out with block displays, that's very difficult, or at least I couldn't figure it out. Usually only text displays can actually be translucent. But anyway, this is a pretty good start. I do like the effect of the growing pillars around the player. I wanted to probably try to do something that's a little less permanent, where I kind of want to just have like blocks like roll across the bottom or something, because the player will never fall down that low anyway, so there's no need to be worried about it being obstructive in any way, especially if it's quick enough. So I want to try to make something that starts down here and interpolates across. All right, so I've done a few changes here I'm going to show you off. So first off, you'll notice that they're immediately darker, and that's because I decided to play with setting its light level lower. It's one of the settings with blocks that's called brightness, and you could set it between 0 and 15 and it will render just like how blocks look under certain lights. Second thing I did was make this huge platform that spawns below and moves up from the ground and sits around that level, which is like 60 blocks below you. The last thing you'll know is you can see that all of these fade in slowly, and the only way I did that was actually not anything direct. Rather, I just set their starting location so low that when they finally come into render, it has a smoother fade into effect, as you can see right there. And that also means the bottom is no longer visible, which is good. The issues that came along with that is I had to scale these up even more, so now their texture is a little bit worse, and then also I had to change the rotation slightly, so some of my bounding boxes aren't perfect. Like right now, the next block I believe should be inside of this. Yep, there it is, and I can't see it from here, so I gotta increase the bounding boxes a little bit more, as you could tell there. But after that, I was thinking of doing something a little bit less decoration reliant, and basically you see here there's 2 blocks that are always in play that are in front of you. This one's next jump and this one's generated jump. That's how they're described in the data pack. What I want to do is, instead of having 2 solid blocks, I want to make that one a block display that is at a different size, so you can tell that this is the block you're supposed to jump to and that one you can't jump to just yet. And that might not seem important to begin with, but you'll notice it as I get some sharp turnarounds that it's actually really needed to understand which one to actually jump to and which one I have to wait before going to. I'm gonna try to get that case to spawn in real quick, but okay, here we go. So this one generated, and then that one, and then that one. These jumps are super close together, and technically jumping to here would be easier, but if I were to do that, nothing will generate next because this is the next block I'm actually supposed to jump to. And when I go here, this block now generates, and I can head this way to continue the path. So instead, I should make the second block in line the block display that makes it look visually different, so you're more inclined to jump to your next block. That is something I want to try to do next. I have done it. I have finally done it. As you can see, there is a block display there now, and it changes based on my location. Yes, it shrinks as I get farther away from it, and it grows as I get closer to the next jump, which is insane. And as I land here, it becomes the next full block. This decoration took a very long time. There is a lot of math to do with all of that, especially distance, as I had to re-engineer the distance formula. If you know anything about distance formula, you know that there's a square root involved, and Minecraft doesn't support square roots, at least within the scoreboard mechanics. So I had to get around that while making my formula. Now, does this mean that this is an exact distance formula? Probably not, but it is good enough for my functions and is working very well right now. So this new feature is really useful in situations like these, like I showed earlier. Now there's no confusion on what block to jump to because one is extremely tiny and one is normal sized. So you would obviously go to that block first, and then the other one would become a block. How I basically did it is a little confusing, so I'm gonna go back here and try to explain it. All right, so let's say this is a block and this is the player, and specifically this is their next block to jump to, and let's say the game generated this to be the second block in a row. So I'm going to jump to this block and into this block. What we have to do is, first off, do all of our calculations based on this guy. So we select this block and we have to do some math using distance. So of course, distance would be as simple as counting how many blocks are between the two if there wasn't 3 dimensions, although we completely ignore y direction because our blocks are at most 2 below and 1 above the center. So for me, I don't see any reason to really account for y direction, but there's still 2 different directions. I could be coming from over here, in which now we have to count this direction as well. So you think it would be as simple as going, well, there's 2 here and 3 here plus that together, that's 5. But of course, Minecraft doesn't really work in this way. It instead works with coordinates, our favorite thing ever. So all of the coordinates are based on its own system, and they basically give you the distance from 0, 0, or this block. So what I have is this and that, as well as this right here and that. So I have to use these coordinates with these coordinates to calculate these ones over here. What you end up having to do is something that's not too difficult. You might be able to even tell, where we take how many fences we have up here, subtract off how many we have over here. So that's 2 there, and that's the same length as this. So that's how we find that value. And then we take this up here, subtract it by what's down here, and we end up with those 2, which is this value. That lines up perfectly, and boom, we got those values. But there is an interesting case. We're facing in negative x and positive z, and with subtraction with negative numbers, it's possible to get negative values, but we can't have those because this is distance. What we're going to have to do in the future is add these 2 together to figure out how far it is away. This would be 5 right now, but if this is technically negative because we're in the negative x direction, that would give us a value of 1, which is not accurate, right? So we have to take each of these, find out if they're negative, and then if they are, multiply it by -1 to make a positive, which isn't too bad. So then we add these 2 together, right? 2 plus 3, that's a total of 5 fence posts there. And that gives us a distance value. Congratulations, great. We know roughly how many blocks we are away from that block. Now it's important to note that with the way that this scales, diagonals are weighted heavier than straight on directions. What does that mean? Well, 3 blocks here is really about this far away along the diagonal, but it's okay in our case. I don't mind it. But anyway, with this distance value we now have, we have to set the scale of this block display. But scale is a number, as I've talked about earlier, 3 numbers that have decimal points that describe how far in the positive directions to scale. That's important to note, is that the negative most corner is where it starts and it scales up into the positives. So we can't just set that to 5, that's not accurate, but rather we need to realize how close we are to this as a percentage, right? How do you define that though? Well, obviously 100% is on the block. If I'm on top of here, then I am 100% of the way here, and this should be a full block. But to define this as 100, we need to define where 0 is, where the block is pretty much entirely full. And I believe in my system, I decided to choose 10, which might seem really big, but I started at 5 and realized I was getting some edge cases, so I expanded it to 10. So at this distance away from that block, that display entity will be entirely empty or invisible, which is fine. That's good. But how do we take this distance of 5 and compare it to here? And most importantly, in a percentage. So here's our distance of 5, just looked at kind of in a scalar way. And you actually could tell really quickly what this value could be. 5 over 10 in division terms, that is just the number 1/2, 50%. And you could say that we are 50% of the way to this block by dividing it, which works. That's great. We could set the scale to 50 and that will work out really well. But that's because we're at the exact halfway point. There's one last little quirk you have to be careful with. This 7 out of the 10 blocks is 70%, but we don't want to set the scale to 70% because that is bigger than 50%. And when we're further away, we want it to be smaller. So we have to subtract 1 by this value to get the other half. This might seem a little confusing, but if you take any percentage and you subtract 1 by it, 1 minus 0.7, you get the other half, which is 0.3. this is the scale we want to set this block to. Now, of course, there are some quirks with how Minecraft works that I don't describe here. For example, you have to do all your operations inside scoreboards. It's the only place you could do operations, which means that if everything has to be a scoreboard, everything has to follow by scoreboard rules. Some of the quirks with scoreboards, you can't have decimal numbers. And as you could tell, percentages are decimals, so we have to like multiply by 100 and then divide it out later. And to make this all work, I had to use macros and functions, which is an entirely new thing I had to use that like lets you reference variables. It was a whole thing. I am so happy that this works and I won't have to deal with that for a bit. So now let's take a look at the board. I deleted the whole thing again. Here's the clip. Yeah, so I did it again. I just deleted the entire signboard again, and my last backup was when I first restored it before I added everything from last video. So I have to do that all again. I was in the middle of testing something that isn't even working yet, and now I gotta do all this. I gotta make these commands only work in the infinite parkour dimension. I don't know why I'm this stupid. And so I had to place all of your signs, all of the new ones on the board again, version 3, and as a precaution I am now saving it in a structure block, and I've actually added commands that prevents the clearing from happening outside the dimension. There's no need to worry about that now. Everything's good. I took that time to reorganize some stuff. Some things between the pink and the orange section got swapped around to make the section smaller, and then I also put this in the back and archived it because all of these are also complete. But this doesn't contain everything we've done today. I'm gonna mark down everything we've done right now. Did I line it up right? I don't know. Anyway, yeah, there we go. We threw everything on there that I've completed. These 3 right here, these 5, even some you might not even realize, like I was able to remove all the fill command ones because I'm no longer using fill commands. And I also implemented this distance thing. All of the stuff we have was set up here. These new changes are gone and those are updated over there. And that leads me to my next part. So if you want to see something in the game and you don't see it up here, I don't expect you to read all of these. So honestly, just use your best judgment. Leave them down in the comments. I'll most likely take a look at them. If I really like the idea, then I'll note it down, put it up on here. We need some more stuff in like the meta progression areas or the development sections. Any suggestions, just let me know in the comments. We were able to get to a lot of the block display stuff, but I still plan on doing a lot of these visual changes. I'm thinking of just moving that to like a new video because I am out of time. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked the video, hit the like button so I know you enjoyed. Subscribe if you want to know when I upload next, and that's gonna be it for today. I'll see you next time.